Okay, first time posting here, and I never thought I would end up being a victim of entitled people until I met Karen. Yes, that's her real name. Funny, right? And she's the epitome of an entitled woman in her late 40s with blonde hair and a piercing gaze that could intimidate anyone. She was the bane of my existence for an entire summer. It all started when I moved into a new neighborhood and I met my neighbor, Tom. Tom was a friendly guy in his mid-30s and we hit it off immediately. He invited me to a barbecue he was hosting, and I couldn't say no. The smell of grilled meat wafted through the air, and I could hear the laughter of children as they played games in the yard. I knew I was going to enjoy living in this neighborhood. That's when Karen showed up. She was wearing a sun hat and a sundress that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her two kids, a boy and a girl, were running around the yard, and she was yelling at them to behave. Tom introduced us, and I could tell right away that she wasn't thrilled to see me. "Hi, I'm Sarah," I said, holding out my hand. Karen took my hand and gave me a weak smile. "Nice to meet you." I could feel the tension in the air, but I didn't think much of it. I mingled with the other guests, enjoying the food and the company. That's when Karen cornered me. "Listen, Sarah, I don't want to be rude, but I need you to keep your voice down. My kids are trying to sleep." I looked around, and the only noise was the sound of children laughing and playing. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not being loud." "Well, I can hear you, and I don't want my kids to wake up." I shrugged, not sure what to say. "Okay, I'll try to be quieter." Karen nodded and walked away, and I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Over the next few weeks, Karen made it her mission to make my life a living hell. She complained about the noise my car made when I pulled into the driveway, the way I mowed my lawn, and the color of the flowers in my garden. She even called the police on me one night, claiming I was having a party and disturbing the peace. It was just me, sitting on my couch watching TV. I tried to ignore her, but she was relentless. I asked Tom about her, and he told me that Karen had always been like this. She thought the neighborhood was her own property, and she didn't like anyone who didn't fit into her idea of what the perfect neighbor should be. I was at my wit's end when Karen knocked on my door one day. I opened it, ready for another round of complaints, but she surprised me. "Sarah, I wanted to apologize for the way I've been acting. I've been going through a rough time lately, and I took it out on you." I was taken aback. This was not what I expected. Okay, apology accepted." Karen smiled, and I thought maybe things would be better from now on. I was wrong, again. The next day, I was having a small gathering of friends in my backyard. We were having a few drinks and listening to music when Karen stormed in. "I can't believe you would be so rude as to have a party without inviting me." "Karen, this is just a small get-together with friends. It's not a party." "I don't care what you call it." Karen marched into my backyard, uninvited, and started looking around. She pointed at the food and drinks on the table. "And what's all this? You're having a party and you didn't invite me?" "You should have told me. At least I'd tell you what to bring and what not to." She started pointing at the food and drinks in disgust. I was getting tired of her behavior. "Karen, you're not entitled to an invitation to my private gathering. Please leave." "Private gathering. This is a public disturbance. You're breaking the law?" I knew she was trying to get under my skin, so I remained calm. "Karen, you're being ridiculous. If you don't leave, I will call the police." She looked stunned for a moment, then smirked. "Fine, call the police. I'll tell them how you're disturbing the peace." I picked up my phone and dialed 911, hoping the police would arrive soon. Karen stayed in my backyard yelling at me and my friends, making a scene. When the police finally arrived, she told them a bunch of lies about how we were making too much noise and how I was breaking the law. The police looked at her like she was crazy, and I could tell they were getting fed up with her. Finally, one of the officers turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we've had several complaints about your behavior lately. You need to stop harassing your neighbors or face legal consequences." Karen looked like she had been slapped in the face. "But I'm the victim here. They're disturbing the peace." The officer shook his head. "No, ma'am, you're the one causing the disturbance. Please leave now or we'll be forced to arrest you." Karen grumbled and stormed off, muttering under her breath, My friends and I were relieved, but we knew that Karen wouldn't give up so easily. The next few weeks were relatively peaceful. I thought maybe Karen had finally realized that her entitled behavior wasn't getting her anywhere. But then, one day, I came home to find a sign in my front yard that read, "No parking, reserved for Karen only." I was furious. Who did she think she was, claiming public parking as her own? I called the police and they told me that Karen had no right to put up the sign, but they couldn't do anything unless she was caught in the act. That's when I hatched a plan. I knew Karen was obsessed with her car, a shiny red convertible that she loved to show off. So I decided to play dirty. I put up a sign in my front yard that read, "Parking for Sarah's friends only. All others will be towed." Sure enough, Karen fell right into my trap. She parked her car in my spot and strutted into her house, thinking she had won. But little did she know, I had called a tow truck to come and take her car away. When Karen came back outside, she was livid. "Where's my car? What have you done with it?" I tried to hide my smirk. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I thought you knew. I had your car towed. You parked in my spot." Karen looked like she was going to explode. "How dare you? You had no right." I held up my hands. "Hey, you put up a sign claiming public parking as your own. I thought I could do the same." Karen realized she had been outsmarted and stormed back into her house. She didn't come out for the rest of the day. From then on, Karen avoided me and my friends. She kept to herself and didn't cause any more problems. I guess she finally learned that entitlement doesn't get you anywhere in life. It was just another Friday night at the local movie theater, or so I thought. My name is Jenny. I'm a 23-year-old college student who works part-time at the theater to help pay for my education. I was stationed at the concession stand when a woman walked up to me. She was in her mid-40s, with short blonde hair and had a look of entitlement on her face. "Excuse me, miss. I want a large popcorn with extra butter and a large soda. And make it quick, I don't have all day." "Sure thing," I replied, trying my best to hide my irritation. I prepared her order as quickly as possible and handed it to her. "That'll be $12.50, I said, holding out my hand for payment. She rolled her eyes and dug through her purse for a moment before finally pulling out her wallet. "Here," she said, handing me a credit card. "And hurry up, I don't want to miss the previews." I swiped the card and handed it back to her. "Thank you. Enjoy the movie." She snatched the popcorn and soda from my hand and walked away without a word of thanks. I couldn't help but roll my eyes and mutter under my breath, "Entitled much?" Little did I know, this woman would soon become the bane of my existence for the rest of the night. As the movie started, I went into the theater to check on the patrons. That's when I noticed the woman again, this time sitting in a seat with a large purse taking up the seat next to her. I politely reminded her of the theater's policy of no bags or personal belongings in the seats. "Excuse me, miss, could you please move your purse so someone can sit there?" She scoffed at me. "Are you kidding me? This is my seat and my purse stays here." I tried to explain that other patrons may need a seat and she could put her purse on the floor, but she refused to budge. I sighed and walked away, not wanting to create a scene. However, it wasn't long until the situation escalated. I received a call on my walkie-talkie from a customer complaining about a woman with a large purse in the theater, obstructing their view. I knew immediately who it was and made my way back to the theater to deal with the situation. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I received a complaint from another customer about your purse. Could you please move it so others can see the movie?" "Absolutely not. I paid for this seat and I'll sit how I want." I was starting to lose my patience, but I kept my cool. "I understand that, but you're also blocking the view of other paying customers. Please move your purse or I'll have to ask you to leave." She huffed and puffed, but finally gave in and moved her purse to the floor. However, that wasn't the end of it. As the movie continued, she kept getting up and down, loudly rustling her popcorn and slurping her soda. Other patrons were starting to get annoyed, and I could feel their eyes on me, as if I was supposed to do something about it. I approached the woman again and asked her to please be mindful of others during the movie. "I paid for my ticket and I'll enjoy the movie how I want," she sneered. I could feel my blood boiling at this point. Ma'am, I understand that you paid for your ticket, but so did everyone else in this theater. Please be respectful of them, or I'll have to ask you to leave. She rolled her eyes and continued with her disruptive behavior. That's when I decided enough was enough. I walked out of the theater and asked my manager to come deal with the situation. He approached the woman and tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't listen. She kept interrupting him and making demands. I want a refund for my ticket and my concessions, she said. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be treated this way. My manager tried to explain that she was disrupting the movie for other patrons, but she wouldn't listen. She demanded to speak to the theater owner and threatened to call the Better Business Bureau. At this point, my manager had had enough. He calmly said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have a zero-tolerance policy for disruptive behavior, and you've been nothing but trouble since you got here." She scoffed and gathered her things. As she walked out of the theater, she turned back to us and said, "You haven't heard the last of me. I'll be sure to leave a bad review on Yelp." We all rolled our eyes as she stormed out of the theater. It was a relief to have her gone, but the whole ordeal had left a bad taste in my mouth. As I was cleaning up the concession stand at the end of the night, I couldn't help but think about the entitled woman from earlier. It was frustrating to deal with someone who thought they were better than everyone else and didn't care about the people around them. But then I realized something. While the entitled woman had ruined her own movie experience with her behavior, she had also ruined the experience for the people around her. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to us, the employees who had to deal with her. In the end, I was just glad that my manager had stood up to her and enforced the theater's policies. It was a lesson for all of us that we shouldn't let entitled people walk all over us, and that sometimes it's necessary to take a stand. As I finished up my shift and headed home, I couldn't help but wonder what other entitled people I would encounter in the future. But one thing was for sure, I wouldn't let them get the best of me. So I witnessed this years ago and have been dying to post it somewhere because I always felt like the conclusion was so satisfying it was worth sharing. So me and my friend went to see a play at a small theater, Beauty and the Beast. Loads of fun. We got the tickets late, so ended up at the absolute tippity top of the place, but right next to the bar, so no problem. During intermission, my friend went to the bar and I stayed to watch our seats. This section is not assigned seating. So I'm looking back over my shoulder in anticipation of her coming back when I see a family of 4 approach, 4 kinda empty seats. I only say kinda empty 'cause the previous occupants had left their jackets over their chairs to reserve them. This isn't a rule, but where I'm from, it is generally respected. If there's a coat on the chair, it's occupied. Find another. This family, however, decided to ignore etiquette and gathered up the other family's belongings and dumped them on an empty chair in the row in front. So now I'm glued to this. How are next family going to react? I wasn't close enough to hear anything, but the previous occupants came back, another family of 4, and things get heated. I could see the parents of the newly seated family pointing aggressively and their mouths moving fast. They're not giving the seats up. So the non-seated family walked away and came back a moment later with a member of staff. I'm thinking, oh, things about to go down, but the family and the staff member walk right past the seated family. They keep walking and disappear out another door, only to reappear a few seconds later inside one of those fancy boxes that sit right next to the stage, the ones that usually seat famous or important people. I look back to the entitled family. The mood is visibly ruined. I'm just sitting there buzzing off the contact high of witnessing such a satisfying moment of karma.